Welcome everyone to Beer, Bourbon, and Games. I am your host, Chris. Today on the channel we are going to talk to Kyle from Oakbrook Brewing Company in Reading, Pennsylvania. Today we're going to talk about a few topics such as the location, how he got started, and even the chupacabra that lives in the basement. So if you are new to the channel, think about hitting that subscribe button and don't forget to leave a comment down below. I hope you'll watch the entire interview as Kyle is fascinating to listen to and I had such a great time interviewing him. Hopefully you'll stick around, grab yourself a beer, and enjoy the interview.
Well, Oakbrook Brewing's been open for about 3.5 years now, and this is my first professional brewing gig. But prior to opening this, I homebrewed for about 6 years. And then I took some classes with Siegel Institute in Chicago, which is a brewing school, a pretty reputable brewing school, been around a long time. And then I filled in some other gaps in my knowledge with an internship in Colorado at a small brew pub there. Well, I was wrapping up my previous career. I had 25 years as a consultant. I was in the consulting world, doing a lot of travel, and that wore me out after 25 years, so it was time to do a career change. And this was the only other thing I had an interest in, and felt, I was hitting at the right time. We were at the front end of this most recent boom in the industry. I was going through a couple of them over the years, and I was just really getting interested in it just before things really started to progress.
Okay, I can definitely say there's been a huge boom of craft breweries in PA alone, and we have quite the amount even in this area.
There's a lot of breweries here. I don't know what the number is in PA, but it's amazing how there was some question as to whether we're going to hit 5,000 or not a number of years, not too many years ago, and then we've just just gone through that. And even then, 10 years ago, the question was already being asked: are there too many? Can they all make it? Is it? And it's an interesting question because it's not. It's been a very, very long time since we had those numbers. Way back, there were that many small breweries just by necessity. Without refrigeration, you needed to have a local brewery in your neighborhood.
Okay.
And then that started declining as the larger breweries took over, and refrigeration became a thing, national distribution, advertising. But to see where it's going, and it's really exciting to see.
Okay.
Very much so.
Not worried about it at all?
Not really. It's like any other business. Think of it this way. Does anybody ever say, hey, there's too many restaurants right now?
No.
Okay, there's too many wineries. Have you heard that one? No. So what is it about brewing that makes people want to say there's too many? I think it's really just compared to what? Compared to what you know? Compared to the past? Compared to what? What we're seeing is that, there's more. The market is getting larger from the craft beer perspective. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that's coming over from the non-craft beer camp, which is still very, very large. We've got maybe 10%, 12% of beer drinkers now. That number's rising. It's probably higher than that now. But the rest of it is still drinking the American light lager, and that's a huge market, a colossal market. Even if the market itself of beer drinkers is not growing rapidly or growing at all, there's still this huge surplus of people who haven't been won over yet by craft beer.
I do see the breweries slowly trying to get more and more people involved with things like White Claw. More people are adapting seltzer, so there definitely is that market.
Yeah,
it's impressive how many people don't.
That's it, and it's huge. And yes, there's changing demographics, and there's changing fads, and there's changing trends, and what have you. And I think part of the way you stay centered in this business is that you've got two options, and there's really two approaches I see in craft beer. Is one, you chase every trend, you chase every fad, you try to stay relevant as of today. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What's the trend today? Or you look at the trends, you find them interesting, you consider them, but you still stay centered by sticking true to your brand, true to your identity. Mm-hmm. And both of those approaches can work. We have breweries not too far away from us that use both methods, and both are doing pretty good. So You know, it's an interesting thing, and you can watch it as closely as you'd like, or you can stand back a little bit and you take a bigger. Yeah, it is, and I think it's kind of a balance, you know, to some extent, and it's never a true balance, you know. It's never a yin and yang thing where, you know, you've got this perfect balance. It's a, you know, what defines your brewery? You know, what exactly does this brewery do that sets them apart?
I think that's important.
Oh my gosh, yes, and that's it. That's exactly what's important.
Is as much as you want everyone to drink some New England IPA or whatever it is, if that's not what you like doing, if that's not your niche or your brand, you're not going to enjoy doing that.
It's, you know, that's true. There's other, that's part of it, and that's a summary. But there's so many other factors to it besides, you know, what I feel, you know, I personally enjoy. I think when you start out as a brewery, you don't have a lot else to go by. You know, most of us come from a home brewing background at some point. We've brewed beer in some capacity before, maybe just for ourselves, our friends, our family. So you think you know what people want based on your experience. You have no idea. You have absolutely no idea what people are going to want until you open your doors and people start coming in and you start getting feedback, and then you start getting questions. Well, when are you going to brew X, Y, and Z type of beer? When are you going to? So, I mean, if you would look at Oakbrook's brewing list and our repertoire of beers from the day we opened 3.5 years ago to even 6 months later, or the next year, or now, it's night and day. I mean, that is brewed. That, you know, that's gotten the way that it is based on feedback from customers, feedback on you know, trends in general. Like when we opened up without a New England IPA, it took us 1.5 years to have a New England IPA on it because I didn't want to do a New England IPA, and because I personally didn't appreciate the style. And that's where you have to draw some kind of line and some kind of balance between what you personally enjoy and what you're serving. Because you can make a beer that you personally enjoy, and when you open your doors, you can be sitting in your brewery alone enjoying that beer. It's great. But you need to find out something that not only that you enjoy, but that you can do well. And I think that's part of the challenge, because a lot of brewers seem to be able to brew beer well that they personally enjoy, and not beers that they don't necessarily appreciate themselves. And I think we're all victims of that to some extent, you know. So it's important to get feedback. It's important to have your staff try beers. It's important to have, you know, do as much as you can up front before you open your doors for business and say, okay, here's our beer list, here's what we're serving.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a business. So as much as you might not want to do something, if that's what 90% of the craft people want, you can sit here with 3 people in here, you can sit in with a full house.
And that's it. And you know, part of it, you know, as well as you say, it's a business. For many of us, it is. For some of us, it's not. I mean, I have to be absolutely honest with you. There's some breweries out there who don't need to have people come there in order for them to pay their light bill, right? And there's some who, like ourselves, I mean, we pay our mortgage because people come here to drink our beer and eat our food. And if that doesn't happen, we're in trouble, you know? So, yes, it is a business, and yes, it should be very much dealt with as a business.
I like seeing that. I like seeing local breweries grow too. And one of the places I interviewed, they started with a 1-barrel system and they moved up to a 3. And you get to see that growth and see where they come from. And then I saw another business where they started with a 7-barrel IPA. I'm like, you had some money going into that to get into it. So
it's you know, and the thing about it, I mean, you have to, you know, go back a little bit before this most recent explosion, if you want to call it that, in craft beer. The common wisdom was that there is no system smaller than 7-barrel that made any financial sense.
Okay.
So that was the wisdom. When I was looking at, you know, at getting into this all the way back in 2010, when I really first started looking into it, there was not this beer of the week experience that you have right now, which is what are you brewing this week? That wasn't the question. The question was, you know, what's your lineup? You know, what are your beers? What are your flagships? This is a relatively, you know, more recent trend in the industry where breweries have a different beer on, a different IPA every weekend, or a different. That's a result of the smaller brew systems, to be quite honest with you. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people would say we're crazy if you opened up with a 2.5-barrel or 3-barrel brew system, because the amount of work required to produce a batch of beer is the same. So you're going to be brewing every day, and you know, you're not going to have the time to spend on other aspects of your business because you're going to be too busy making these small batches of beer, right? So the common wisdom, you know, not too long ago was that you needed a 7-barrel system for it to pencil out. Maybe a 5-barrel in some circumstances, but a 7-barrel was kind of viewed as the entry point for the industry because of the labor, because of the, you know, what happened was that more and more home brewers, more and more people got exposed to brewing, and they wanted to go public with that. They wanted their beer to be available. They found that the costs involved in getting a 7-barrel system was high, probably prohibitively, but they still wanted to do it. So what started happening was these brews were popping up, and they're like, I love brewing. I don't mind brewing every day. You don't mind brewing every day when you're not brewing every day. It sounds like a great idea. Trust me, it's not a good idea. But the reality of it was you had breweries opening up with these, what I consider undersized systems. The flip side of that is because you're brewing multiple times a day, you can brew something different tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not a 4-day process to get a batch of beer through because you're doing small batches. So, and it's not as much of a commitment. I can make a banana strawberry cookie crisp beer that sounds absolutely interesting. And if it's not a great beer, it'll be gone by next weekend, right? When you're doing 7 barrels of a banana strawberry cookie crisp, you better hope you're hitting a trend dead on, you know? And that's affected us. I mean, we started with a 5.5 barrel system with our brew house, but all of our other equipment is repurposed 7-barrel equipment. I got 7-barrel fermenters, 7-barrel bright tanks. I did not have a big budget. So instead of going with new stuff that was undersized, and this is what the benefit was of interning in Colorado, the gentleman that I interned with, I sought out because he had done video in the industry years before called Frankenbrew, where he showed how to take old dairy equipment, non-brewing equipment, and convert it into brewing equipment on a budget. So I sought him out, found he was operating a pub in Colorado, called him up. He said, yeah, come on out and we'll talk. And I was very inspired by him. So with a small budget, I was able to put together some equipment that, while it's not the most, what's the word I want to use? It's not copper clad, right? It doesn't make a striking visual presentation, but it's incredibly functional and it allows me to turn out good beer on a reasonable schedule with a minimal amount of work. So there's multiple ways you can come into it. I think we started talking about that a little bit. I mean, you can come in with a large budget and throw money at everything, or you have to be you can be a little more judicious with it and make wise investments and work a little extra up front to make your dollar stretch a little more.
Yeah,
so I covered a lot of territory there.
Oh, no, you're fine.
But the long and short of it is, yes, there's the old mentality was you needed a 7-barrel system for it to pencil out at all. That's changed these days now, and the market is more accepting of inconsistencies from batch to batch. They want that. They want a different beer every weekend. And that didn't exist. That whole concept really didn't exist when the larger brew systems were
Yeah, there's so many trends. Yeah, it doesn't do what works for you, I guess.
Well, that's it. And every brewery, should hopefully find that. They find that spot, and there is flexibility. I mean, I said a little bit ago that you need to see what your customers want, and you need to take their recommendations into consideration. But at the same time, you have to know what your identity is and what is it you're going to do. What is it you can do, and who are those people who've decided you're the place they're going to go. You start to get hopefully your own following, your own loyal brand of customer. Although loyalty is a very different thing today with craft beer than it was just 10, 15 years ago. So it all goes into the mix. It's not like there's a one size fits all answer or solution.
No, I think there's no formula.
And you got to make good beer. I mean, these days that's one. But that alone, and the Brewers Association, I had the Brewers Association said this years and years ago, is that it's not enough to make good beer anymore. There's a lot of good beer out there. It's not enough to make good beer. There has to be more to incentivize the public to come to your location or to order your beer, other than it being good beer.
Yeah.
And that's an intangible that can sometimes be difficult to nail down or grasp.
Certain ones you see them and like, I don't know why they're popular, or there's just no rhyme or reason to some of the stuff out there.
They're giving people something that they're looking for, and you don't always necessarily know what that is. Sometimes it's very obvious, and sometimes there's a certain je ne sais quoi. There's just something out there, you don't know what it is, but there's an attraction, and you hope you find them, and you put efforts into creating them, and sometimes you just step in them. You just don't. It's all part of the mix. It's all again. It's not a one template thing. So that I have to go back to my previous career in the consulting world. I originally grew up in the Reading area. I moved out when I was about 19 and wound up on the West Coast. And I wound up in the IT consulting business. I was a self-employed consultant for just over 25 years. And living very happily in the Portland, Oregon area. My wife and I had settled in, had a home, had a life established there. And then nearly at the exact same time, my aging parents and my wife's aging parents started experiencing some issues. We lost my father, we lost her father. Our mothers were alone for the first time in their lives and needed help. So we wound up moving back to Pennsylvania. What we thought was going to be, short term, trying to get things stabilized, and the assumption was we were moving home after that and move back to Portland. And then, life gets in the way of that. Things happen, and the next thing you know, you've dropped anchor and you're here to stay. So we had many conversations about that and what that meant. I had still kept my consulting clients in Portland, so I was spending 10 days in Portland, 20 days in Pennsylvania, 10 days in Portland, 20. I did that for almost a decade. And that sounds like it's a lot of fun. It's fun for maybe this long. And after that, it just becomes tiring, and you find that your life is slipping away. And you're never home, you're just leaving, or you're just getting back, or you're there, or you're here. You know what, I'm sorry, we'll do that next time. I didn't get to mow the grass this time, but when I come back, and then the next thing you know, it's another cycle and another year of your life is lost. And that went on for 10 years, and finally I just had to stop the train wreck. It was too much. I mean, it was, I didn't know where I was. I'd get up in the morning and go, I'm going to go, oh wait, I'm not, that's 3,000 miles away. I can't do that today. So it was just personally, it got very, very difficult to continue doing that as I got older. The recovery time just from the flights alone, So I want to say 365 flights or 375 flights over the course of X number of years, and it was enough. I had had enough. And in that same token, the IT business is one of those where you have to reinvent yourself constantly. I mean, what you knew it used to be like every 5 years you had a reframe. It's constant, and it just didn't hold that same interest to me 25 years into it as it had in the beginning, and I'm done now. I'm done. So then the question was, okay, we're not moving back. We're situated here now. What is it that I can do? What is it that I miss about Portland? I mean, I love living on the West Coast. I love Oregon. And no place is perfect. Every place has its pluses, its minuses, its challenges. But there were certain things about the culture of Portland, the beer culture particularly, which I really, really missed. And my wife and I spoke about it. I had already taken up home brewing. And we were kind of inspired by a chain of restaurants out in Portland that had done a really good job of preserving architectural history in the city and around the city. They would find these really cool buildings that usually had outlived their original purpose, but that were still part of the community and that were really in jeopardy of being lost just because they were deprecated. They no longer could serve their original function. Usually a tiny little school in the middle of a neighborhood that was too small to be a school anymore. In this case, a firehouse that was too small to house modern fire equipment. We were looking for something like that as a starting point for a small brewery and pub. And it was very, very, what's the word I want to say, not intense in the beginning. It was a very casual effort. I still had established some consulting clients around here. Things weren't uncomfortable as they had been with the traveling. So I was kind of keeping an eye out for a spot and just never saw the right one. And then I found this place.
Okay.
And it was exactly what I was looking for. It was in the middle of a fairly nice neighborhood. Really nice neighborhood I got to learn after I spent some time here. It was a really cool building, solid bone structure, it needed a lot of cosmetic work, but it had a lot going for it. I mean, it had a really nice kind of feel to it. It was an iconic look to the building from the outside. When you see that building, you know where it is. You know that that's the Oakbrook Fire Station, right? Great history. There's just a lot to it. It was just the right size for me. It was exactly what I was looking for. So we put an effort in to get the building, which is a whole other interview. But it basically, long and short of it, we had some legal challenges from some neighbors, a neighboring business particularly, and it took us 3 years to get the building. I mean, from the day we put the offer in on the property to the day we opened our doors for business was 1 day shy of 4 years. And we were tied up in court, and it went all the way to the state Supreme Court, where they finally threw out the challenge. But that process of court date, court victory, appeal, court date, court victory, that played out 7 times over the course of 4 years. So at the end of the day, I had a lot of time to reconsider.
Yeah, I was going to say,
yeah, it was a long lead-in, and during that whole time I was still traveling. I mean, it was like I was mentally done with it, but I couldn't stop because I was...
You know what's happening.
No, and the thing about it is you get into something like that, you don't know this is going to be 3 or 4 years. You know that, well, you're going to have a court date in 3 months and then we'll find out. And then the court date happens, you win, everything's good. Now, well, great, I can get started. No, they're appealing. Well, what's that going to mean? Well, that's going to mean we're going to have to wait a few months to find out the court date. And then, and this just kept going on and on and on and on. We kept winning. We won 7 times in court, and they kept appealing. And it just, the strategy was to run me out of time and money and energy, and they almost did.
I was going to say, well, that shows some real desire to be here for
stubbornness.
Yeah.
It was stubbornness. Yeah. It was I appreciate you trying to spin it into something good, but no, it was just, I think what it was, if somebody had come to me and given me a really good reason why I shouldn't be doing what we were doing, I would have listened to them. I mean, I'm a very open person. If you've got a logical reason that you think this is a bad idea, but to not even say hello but sue me in court and take me to court, it was very odd. It was a very odd series of circumstances. But at the end of the day, it was worth it. I mean, we saved the building. It was going under the wrecking ball. If we didn't get it, this group that was opposed to me was going to get it if I did. And their plans were to knock it down and level it, as they said. So, at the end of the day, we not only got the building, we turned it into something that the community can appreciate and use again. And also, during that 3 or 4 years in court, the research that I did, I learned so much about the history of the neighborhood, about the fire station, and we incorporated a lot of that into what we do here. I think, yes, there's constantly things running to it, but on the scale and the impact and the proportion of that, no, that was pretty much, I hit all my rapids at once.
You got it out of the way.
Yeah, got it out of the way, exactly. I think for me, personally, from a personal standpoint, I put so much effort and thought into the brewery side of things. What you have to realize is when you open up a brew pub, you're running a restaurant. There's a restaurant side of this, and it's as, if not more important for your financial well-being to make sure you have that part down better than the beer, because the beer is easy peasy compared to running a restaurant. It requires a set of skills and a staff and a plan and so much more. There's so much to running a restaurant that it's almost like having 2 separate businesses at one time. You're not starting one business, you're starting 2, and they are inextricably linked to each other. That was probably the biggest adjustment for me because I did not come from a food background at all. The beer was my focus, was my thing, and we're going to have this restaurant. There wasn't a lot of that fourth, I shouldn't say forethought, but nearly as much planning and concern about it. When in reality, that's what I should have been concerned about. It's not easy. It's a constant set of challenges. It's a highly disruptive business. Things are happening every day that require your attention. If you're fortunate enough where you have multiple partners, someone can focus on the food, someone can focus on the beer. I didn't have that luxury. I'm one guy, and to split your attention between two completely separate but somewhat linked sets of needs is not an easy. It's not an easy feat.
I can understand that. Do you start off small? Do you have like, here's some chips and bar food, or what are we going to do to elevate that portion? How often do we change the menu?
Yep.
People don't think this is good.
And the thing about it is, that was an easy question back when I was getting started, because this was all new. There wasn't already an expectation. So if you opened up with chips and pretzels, people weren't gonna, they weren't gonna revolt. But now there's a certain level of expectation that isn't the same as it was 10 years ago, right? People expect really good food. They expect a certain experience, right? And they're coming in already. They're coming in your door, and you're not the first brewery they've been to ever. I mean, maybe when one out of
probably not even that day.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So people are coming into your business now with a preconceived idea, even though they want something different. They don't want it to be that different. All right, it's gotta fit a certain set of expectations now, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But as a business owner, it's a challenging thing.
And what are you going to do to make them stay for
that's
as long
it.
as you can?
That's exactly it. I mean, we hope that the good beer will keep them here. You're always doing events and things to bring people in. Some breweries will get a moon bounce. So it's really interesting to see how different breweries and different people address that exact issue, because it's a real issue now. This industry has changed, it's evolved, it's grown into something that nobody saw the moon bounce 10 years ago. I'm saying that it wasn't something that was in the equation.
I think it's generational.
I think you might. There's that too. I mean, now we've had another generation of beer drinkers come in that have really. I got to go back just a little bit. When I first started drinking beer, there were some craft beers, but it was very limited. I mean, Sam Adams was probably the first that I was exposed to, and but there was not this breadth of beer options. The newest generation of beer, they are used to having all of these options, like I said, different beer every weekend. That's relatively new. I mean, they don't realize that as a group because this is what they've seen, but that's a newer thing, and it's a challenging thing.
It goes both ways, where you're giving them something to constantly have, but even me, I'm starting to get fatigued from it. There's certain breweries where they release 2 or 3 things a week, and they have can distributions. I go, well, I don't get to try those 3, and I just missed out on those 3 because I didn't go for 1 week.
Right.
And I like to be able to go somewhere,
But they've succeeded because you're thinking in your mind, I didn't go that week.
Yep.
And that is a bad thing. and so that's the challenge. That is a challenge, and this industry has created that on its own. We have, as an industry, created I don't want to over-dramatize it, but we have, in a sense, created something that is now taken on a life of its own. And now you have to deal with the reality of that. It ain't going back. I mean, things aren't going to revert back to a previous time. It's only going to go forward. So the question now is, where does it go from here? I mean, this is where we're now at. We're at a point where you yourself admittedly said, I made the mental note, dang, I didn't go there this week. I missed out.
I have FOMO. I missed out on something.
Right. And that is where we're at today. And good, bad, or indifferent, it's where we're at. And I think it's exciting because there are so many options. It brings with it its own set of challenges, and I don't know. It makes it very, very difficult to figure out where we are going to be down the road. It used to just be, well, we're planning on 15% growth this year. Where does that put us? Those aren't the questions anymore. They really aren't. The questions now are, okay, great. What are we doing next week?
Yeah.
So that's the reality of it, and there's, I wish I could say that, well, that fits well within our business model, or it fits well with it. I don't think it fits anybody's business model. I mean, you have to, you have to be on show every weekend, so it's part of the gig.
I almost see a lot of people measure success by the amount of taps they have now. There's a couple of businesses, they started with, we had 6 taps, now we have 16. You have to brew just that much more beer to keep those constantly.
But in their defense, that is a draw. I mean, that's a draw.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be I'm going down to my favorite brewery and I'm going to see what they have on tap.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you pull up your phone and you don't go there if they don't have that one beer that you want.
That's true.
And it's a very interesting dynamic, because we want to meet the demands of our customers. Well, what is that? Every single customer is coming in with a different demand. I want your such and such stout, or when are you doing that IPA again? Or it becomes, it has the potential to become overwhelming. And how do you deal with that? I don't know. Like you said, some just keep adding taps. Okay, well, we're going to have 57 taps. Okay. I judge my success as to, was I able to pay my light bill on time this month? Are people digging the beer? They tell me that by coming in and buying it, which allows me to pay the light bill, right? So it isn't all about the lights, that's just a barometer.
We can drink in the dark.
We can. It's a good point. It's a good point. It's. I see that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. There was this. When we opened, we only had 8 taps. That was it, and we had trouble keeping them filled the first few months, first several months. And now we've expanded, and we've got 15, 16 beer on tap most times. 12 to 16. And I know that that's on the low end.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be 8 was a good number. I mean, that was what you'd go into a brew pub and you have like 8 beer on tap, small brewery. Now, it's just changed. And how you keep up with that, that's everybody's challenge, So I guess the best way to answer that is, go back to the building. When you get a location, there's a lot of things you take into consideration. You think about demographics in your neighborhood. You think about through traffic, foot traffic, how many cars are passing your door. All those things are really important to help define the brewery. But the things you don't know, like I said, that black swan, the thing you don't see coming, that can have an impact on your business. There's another brewery nearby that has a building that they purport to be haunted. Okay. And it does very well for them, and it's really interesting because people they take that in as part of the lore and part of the thing. Now, that building was haunted, and the buyers of that and the operators of that brewery had nothing to say about that. They got the brewery, it came with ghosts. You do what you can with what you got.
And the ghost didn't appeal at quarter round?
Yeah. So we got this building, and we didn't realize at first, but 6 months into it, that there's a chupacabra in the basement. And, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Life gives you a chupacabra, you make chocolate habanero stout.
He has quite the Facebook presence. Are you worried about him?
I'm constantly worried about him. He's kind of like a loose cannon. You don't know what's going to happen with him from day to day.
So for anyone who's not on Facebook or any of those, follow Oakbrook for sure. But Chupi has a Facebook account as well, and right now he's actually trying to get a flamethrower drone, which I don't know if there's any donations yet. Hopefully not, but he's got some tenacity. I've been worried about it.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's my cross to bear.
I mean, you can't have a goat farm anywhere near here because of him.
It's like a kid. It's almost like having a kid underfoot. I don't know what to say. The staff does pretty good with it, considering.
Have you lost any, like when they went into the basement? Have you ever had?
No, we had people who were afraid to go down there, but luckily we haven't had any casualties. But he's become kind of part of our identity. The cycling team that we have here, we have a cycling club that does weekly rides out of here and does a few fundraising donation type rides. every year, kind of adopted him as their mascot, and that's where he sort of wound up backing into being our mascot, because he's probably become the most recognizable character. He's done good. I mean, he's always seems to stop just one step short of disaster. So that's, you know.
And I see he comes out every once in a while. Wasn't he at the hill climb?
He was at the hill climb, yeah. He comes out every once in a while, you'll find, and it's the funniest thing too, because we'll be looking through pictures from some of those events, and there it'll be like right in the background in some shot. It was actually in the Reading Eagle, I think, in the background of one of the shots from the hill climb, and it's just amazing. He just keeps popping up like Forrest Gump, like in all these like spots, you know. It's pretty amusing. And he's recognizable, and people have kind of taken to him. And yeah, he does have a good fight. He's only got almost 200 followers now on Facebook, which, you know, what can I say?
Definitely something you didn't expect.
No. So I think it's a matter of keeping perspective, and that all starts with what is your perspective. You know, you have to define your brewery. If you don't define it, it will be defined for you. So you have to decide who you are and what you represent. What is it that sets you apart? And then you have to view that through the lens of what the demands are. And I said before, it's balancing. It's never truly balanced. It's something that you give, you know, you turn the knobs and dials, and you give the trends, and you give the customers' requests the attention that they deserve based on how they fit with what you perceive to be your strengths, right, or weaknesses that you want to avoid. You know, for instance, I don't do sour beers. I don't do them for a variety of reasons. None of them is a particular disdain for sour beers. It doesn't fit my process. It would be disruptive for me to do them properly, and that's key. Can we knock out a sour beer in properly? Absolutely. It'll be a terrible product. So I don't do that product. It just doesn't fit what I do. You can't be all things to all people. And I think that's the first thing you absolutely have to realize in this business, because if you try to be all things to all people, you wind up really being nothing at all. You wind up, you know, chasing a fad, and then when the fad changes, you're back at square one again. You've not established anything. You've not built something that's going to be, to be quite honest with you, it's going to be around very long. You know, when the first shakeout comes, who's going to be shaken out? It's going to be the organizations with no identity. And, you know, that's, whether that happens now or happens 2 years from now or 5 years from now, you just have to do the best you can do to put out the best product you feel capable of putting out. And sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you make a bad decision, and you'll either do that beer that you should have done, or you won't do that beer that you should have done, you know, or you'll wait too long, or you'll miss the boat, or look, there's no crystal ball, and you have to realize that as well. So you do what you can do with the resources that you have, in line with what you feel is your identity. And I know that sounds like a lot of doublespeak, but it really is that. That is really the essence of it. Is where do you see yourself being 6 weeks, 6 months from now, a year from now? Do you see this line of beers being a foundation, or are these things just ships in the night that come and go off your taps? Every brewery has its own identity, and some of that you shape yourself, and some of that your customers and your clientele shape. And it ain't a 50-50 thing, it ain't a 60-40 thing. It's up to you how well you hold on to that original vision, how you change that vision over time, and what changes that vision. You know, there's the external forces, the internal forces, there's productions, there's costs, it's all goes into the mix, and it isn't any one thing. And it's not always the same proportions. Good examples are New England IPA. Our New England IPAs have done phenomenal for us. Our X50 and our 51 are our flag. They've become essentially our de facto flagship beers. I didn't set out for that to happen. I did that reluctantly when we brewed our first New England IPA, because it just wasn't where we were yet. You know, it wasn't the next logical step for me. We had a lot of other ground we wanted to cover, But again, that external force, that external pressure of wanting that beer, people coming in and demanding that, and it's like, look, if you don't have this, we're going to go somewhere else to get it. Well, that you have to hear that. You can't, you can't ignore that. You can't say, well, I'm only going to stick with this lineup and that's that. I mean, I guess you could, but it's not wise. It's not wise. So when you start hearing patterns in the requests and not just a one-off, you start, and I waited too long to do that beer. I mean, we could have done that beer probably 9 months to a year sooner than what we did. And when we did, it made a difference for us because it's quite good. I'm sorry, but we've done really well with it. I think it stands up. That beer, I mean, we've produced some beers that I wouldn't reproduce again, that I'm not happy with. Those two particular beers have done well, and I can appreciate them. And that was one that I made a mistake. I waited too long to do those beers. Had we done those a year sooner, we'd be farther down the road in our distribution, farther down the road.
Like I said, no crystal ball.
No crystal ball, no. And on the same token, there's some beers that we had out early on that weren't a good idea. They just weren't the right thing for us at that time, and they've disappeared from our tap list. So if you had all the answers to that, you'd be unique, first of all, and you'd be a lot farther ahead. But it's a struggle, it's a constant struggle. Probably, like, count the ones like the experimental beers, we did like 60 different experimental beers. So those were just, we used to have a pilot system that I would do small 20-gallon batch test breweries on. That had to go just because there wasn't time to spend doing small batches. I had to put more time on the production system. But in the first 2 years, we did tons of experimental batches of really small, just 2 sixtels or 3 sixtels at the end of the day. So there were a lot there. I'm not going to count those as part of it because there's so many of them, and not all of them have gone on tap. But as far as beers that were brewed on the full-scale system, man, I'd say we probably had about 30 to 35 different beers, and out of those, 20 remain as recurring. I wouldn't say flat, but just recurring. Like there's a seasonal beer, like our St. Filbert's Hazelnut Brown that's coming out now, which is spun off of our 38 special base recipe. That's not a flagship. It's something that'll come out. We'll have that out during the fall weather, cooler weather, then it goes away and it comes back next year. We have a couple of wheat beers, cranberry wheat that comes on around the holidays. Again, I don't consider it a flagship, but it's a recurring beer. It's something you'll see again, and something that I have. It's in our active file recipes.
Seasonal.
Yeah. You try to work some of those in. I'd say about half the beers we have, a little over half of them are flagships that are on year round, or if they're not on, there's more on the way in the pipeline. And then the other half or so are come and go seasonals, and then once in a while we'll do a one-off. But again, I have a 5.5 barrel brew system that I can effectively get 6 barrels out of. That's a lot of beer, and you want to make sure that you're, from my perspective, that I don't get too nichey and brew a beer that's just a little too select. Just because I got a lot of beer at the end of the day, it's gonna, and I need to. You don't want that sitting around. I mean, you don't want your beer aging. So if it's not a beer that should be aged, so you want to be able to turn. You have balance turning over the beers that you're making with the appeal. I had a smoked porter we opened up with, which I loved, and people who like that beer love that beer, and they're asking me today. This you got to keep in mind. There was one batch of this beer brewed when we opened 3.5 years ago. Today, I still have customers ask me, when are you going to brew that beer again? And what they don't realize is that beer was sitting in that tank for the better part of 4 months because it was such a niche beer. It had a very distinctive smoky character to it that some people loved. Most people did not. Most people went, that's too smoky. I don't like that. And I had to stop making that beer simply because I could not dedicate at the time the equipment to hold that beer for the length of time that it took for the people who did appreciate it and enjoy it. So there's a beer that I know some people really loved, but because of its limited appeal, I had to stop. It's not feasible for us to do on a full-scale system, and things have changed a little bit now. We're kegging off more beer. We've invested in some additional cold storage. So I'm able to brew a batch of beer, empty out the serving tank by kegging it all off, and then bringing kegs of it on here and there. And now we're doing some distribution too, and we have some customers who like to take the one-off different stuff. So now I have means of getting getting this beer out of here that maybe has a smaller group of people who really appreciate it. So I think we'll be doing some more of that again here and there. That's something I look forward to next year.
What's the yield for a flat gallon? Like 150 gallons?
5.5 barrel gets me about 165 gallons of beer at the end of the day. Some of the beers we can finesse that into a little bit more. That on average, that's about what I'm getting, about 165 gallons. So, with 45 seats, yeah, that's a lot of beer. That's a lot of beer. Now, our things like our X50, I have to brew that almost every week, and that's half my, a good half of what I'm brewing is the 50 and the 51, and then everything else has to go through the other half. And that's the consideration. There's a good and there's bad. Everything cuts both ways. Because we have this beer now that's very popular.
It cuts into the time of the others.
Yeah, it does, and it limits my ability to have a wider breadth of beer on, because 50% of my production is all this one style. So I'm not complaining about that. I'm flattered that people are enjoying that beer and that we need to do that. But it brings with it a new set of challenges and circumstances. Now I have decisions to make. Do I invest in more fermenters? Do I just get a larger fermenter and double back? There's things you need to constantly adjust and reevaluate and see where you want to be going, where you are going, where you are. It's all you triangulate your way to success, hopefully, and I think that's probably overall of all the questions they asked me. I think that's probably the most thoughtful that I have to put the most thought into is how much decisions do you it stays with what you originally wanted to do versus your customers versus what's selling. It all goes into the mix. It all goes into the mix, and there's no one formula.
There's no right or wrong answer to this one.
There may be, but you don't find out to the end. To brew, specifically to brew. Well, I really enjoy brewing our wheat beers. I think we have, probably for local breweries, we probably have the widest selection of wheat beers over the course of the year. I think that they're probably underappreciated. They're not a big thing right now. They're not a hop monster, but they are really something different. It allows us to keep variety on our taps, and a style that, especially during the summer, does really well for us. Our peach wheat that we do is another big seller. That's done really, really well for us this summer. We have our last batch now in September. We have our last batch of that going out, and that's going to be off taps until warm weather comes again next year.
It's a good refreshing style.
Yeah.
People, after you've had so many IPAs, sometimes it's refreshing to have that shandy.
Yep.
So that it's different with beer.
And I'm making this distinguishment. I'm distinguishing between the answer I was going to give and what you actually asked me, which is my favorite style to brew. I really do enjoy brewing wheat beers. They just, from start to finish, they just fascinate me. I think we do them really well. I think we execute those beers really, really well. Beyond that, my least favorite beer to brew, we did a highly attenuated IPA not too long ago. Our Savage Mountain brewed IPA. Brewed IPAs are probably my least favorite style of brew. The process to brew that beer, you basically have to do everything wrong. Okay. Everything that you know about brewing, you have to turn upside down and break every best practice rule to make that beer. And at the end of it, you have a really interesting beer. People seem to really enjoy it.
It seemed to be kind of fatty. Like I know it was over in the West Coast for a while before it got to us, but it seemed to go away pretty quickly here.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is probably because of what I think people enjoyed it. We had a lot of compliments on it. In fact, I've had people say this is the first brew that we've had that I've actually enjoyed. And I know that we could do okay with the beer, but honestly, the process is laborious. It's so different from anything else that I felt it was outside of the template of what I felt comfortable brewing. and so that from that standpoint, that's why. And I think if I had that experience with it, I would say that most other brewers probably had a very similar experience. And it was like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. And I think that might have contributed to its demise in some way. I don't know. Yeah, no, I mean we got a lot of new interesting stuff coming up. Some of it we're not quite prepared to announce yet, but there's some really interesting local beer things going on. You're going to see more of our beer in more places over the course of the next year, and some reviving some Berks County history in the process. I really appreciate the feedback we've gotten from our customers. I appreciate the fact that Reading has actually embraced us and that our business is doing really well. We're on tap now in about 35 or 40 locations around the city, which is just, I never in my wildest dreams thought just a year ago when we started the distribution that was going to happen that way, and now I'm scrambling to adjust to that. So we're trying now to keep those taps supplied at the same time as keeping a good selection on the pub. I appreciate everybody's patience. People have been asking us for private keg sales. We've just recently been able to start to the private keg sales. So it's been great. I really can't say enough about the support we've gotten from our customers here in the city, and we look forward to the next year.
If you're watching the video, I hope that you'll come out to Oakbrook and give them a try. There's a lot of awesome breweries in the neighborhood, but none of them have a chupacabra. So I would say definitely come out here. They have amazing beer. It's an awesome building. I will definitely put some shots of the building in here so you guys can see it. It's an old restored firehouse, so that is unique in itself. And you'll get to talk to Kyle if he's here. He's an awesome guy. Just come out and enjoy the beer.